Welcome, everyone, to Eaton Fire Residents United Speaker Night. I am Jane Lawton-Potel, the founder of EFRU, and I'm very excited to welcome the LA Fire Health Study, who will be speaking to us tonight about a whole host of concerns. First, before we move over to our list of panelists, I am going to familiarize some of you with our organization. Eaton Fire Residents United is a collection of residents who've been impacted by the fires in Eaton area. We are a resident-led advocacy group developing a mapping project that compiles industrial hygienist testing results from private homes in Altadena, Pasadena, and Sierra Madre. Our mission is to inform the public about potential pollutants affecting homes and neighborhoods impacted by the Eaton fire. Our group includes scientists, professors, and PhD researchers who review these reports and identify the contaminants found. This data informs EFRU's advocacy efforts to raise public awareness, engage media attention, and push for stronger indoor testing and remediation protocols from local officials to ensure a safer, healthier environment in the aftermath of WUI events. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Carly. Would you like to make the introductions?
I apologize. I have no voice because of a sinus infection. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn it immediately over to Yifeng from the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, who is part of the LA Fire Health Study Consortium. And she can talk a little bit more about the study and then about her team's data. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for having us here today.
Thank you. And your blue cup.
Hello. Okay, so thank you so much. I'm gonna just share a few slides and talk to you through some of the work we have been doing as part of the LA Fire Health Study. Can everybody see my screen? All right, thank you so much. So I'm going to focus on the indoor-outdoor air quality data that we have collected during and after the Los Angeles urban wildfire they were experienced. I'm Yifeng Zhu, professor of environmental health sciences. I'm here joined with my colleagues, Dr. Michael Jarrett, who's also a leading role in this project. With this, let me see if my slide. Just a little bit background. I think everyone is familiar with this. This LA fire is so devastating. It started on January 7th, become one of the worst disasters in the US history. So many structures got burned. So many people lost their life. So what we have been working on is starting from the second day of the fire, we went out to measure what is in the air. Just as some context, for fires like this, it will release a very complex mixture of pollutants, including both the particle phase particulate matter. I hope this group is already familiar with PM10, and also with volatile organic compounds in the gas phase, or some of those semi-volatile organic compounds that can go between both the particle phase and gas phase from those burned structures, vehicles, household products, in addition to the biomass that typically burned in wildfires. And those emissions can last for weeks to months as those damaged materials, especially the soft goods in people's home, get impacted by the fire smoke. And then those components can get absorbed into it and keep off-gassing for a very long period of time. So our team went out the second day the fire started. So far we have run 3 rounds of measurements. The first measurement starts during the active burning period from January 8th to the 15th for a week. We measured 7 homes. Those are mainly in the Palisade area, just because UCLA are closer to that neighborhood, and we were able to recruit homeowners based on opportunities that quickly allow us to set up our samplers inside those homes. And then the next phase, we call it smoldering phase. This is when the fire mostly in containment, but still some lingering smokes going on. And this is from January 24th to 30th. We call it phase 2, and we sampled another 6 homes. By that time, we were able to get closer to the Eaton area. And then finally, during the February, we call it off-gassing period. This is when fire is completely contained, and we went out again and do the 3rd round of measurements across 11 households, both in the Pali area and in the Eaton area. So here are just some photos showing like how our samplers look like. We use those diffusion tubes to collect 1 week long integrate samples, and we send them out to our UC Davis colleagues for VOC measurements. We also use something called UPass sampler. They collect PM 2.5 samples filters onto filters, and then will allow us to run metal analysis, mass analysis, and black carbon analysis on those filter samples. So as part of the LA fire study, we also went out with our UT Austin team colleagues when they were doing mobile measurements, which I think some of colleagues will present some of this data today. So my talk will focusing on the indoor-outdoor data we collected over these 3 periods in response to the fire. So here I want to just give you some visual about what those filters look like once we collect those from during the active fire period. This is a sample we collect from Los Angeles, West LA. This is the left. It's showing the sample collected outdoors versus the indoor samples. To the right, this is one of the home we were able to get in during the active fire period from Pasadena, really just south of 210 freeway. As you can see how dark the filter can come to, and it really shows a heavy PM loading of those filters. So the indoor filters look much cleaner, which is not surprising because people close their windows, stay indoors, and run air purifiers. All of those measures help to reduce the levels of PM inside people's home. And then we run those filters for metal analysis. We'll show you some preliminary data. As I mentioned, we also did VOC measurements. For VOC measurements, again, this is you're looking at a map showing what's going on in the Palisade area versus what is in the Eaton area to the right. You'll see a group of bars, and they're labeled with numbers underneath. Each number indicate whether this is collected during the phase 1, active burning, phase 2, smoldering, phase 3, off-gassing. And you see 2 color bars. The yellow one, the orange-yellow one shows the indoor VOC levels, and the outdoor levels is showing on the blue bars. So here is the scale that we're looking at from 0 ppb to 2 ppb. This map shows focus on benzene, toluene, isobenzene, and xylene, so-called BTACs. Those are like toxic VOCs that we're often focusing on during those measurements. The big message jumping out, if you look at focus, especially for this group, focusing in the Eaton area, then you will see a lot of those VOCs become much higher indoors than outdoors in the phase 2, phase 3, when we finally be able to get into those homes in those areas. We actually have a preprint to provide more detailed information about those data as the link showing underneath here. So to put those data all together, this is information that we summarize across all the homes we measured in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 for BTACs, indoor versus outdoor. We were also able to compare those to the pre-fire data, which we do have some measurements from some of the homes that we sampled before the fire started. And similarly, we did the same plot for the benzene levels, indoor and outdoor, over the 3 phases, comparing those to the data we collected before fires. Some big take-home away messages. The outdoor VOC levels are during the fires were for sure higher, much higher than the general concentrations in the LA basin, but they're generally still lower than the California and EPA standard. The outdoor concentrations really peaked during the fires, but they are below the PPB levels set by California OHIA Office for Health Concerns. The indoor VOCs are actually higher compared to the outdoor levels, especially after the fire get contained, and those can last even for days and weeks. This is very likely due to those smoke impacted soft materials that are off-gassing. I think lots of the community members have concerns about soft goods and the indoor air quality post-fires. So our data also suggesting there is a concern for that. And then our advice would be try to get more ventilation going on into your indoor space and run air purifiers if you can, but also open windows, get ventilations, starts to let the off-gassing go through its phase and bring in more. Right now, the outdoor airs is in certain areas is actually much better than the indoor. So this is something that we want the community to hear about. We also run some elements analysis for those PM filters. As we mentioned, we collect those samples, we run those elements. Here, I'm just listing some of those fire-related elements. Arsenic, cadmium, chromium, lead, those are typical fire-related elements. Potassium is actually a good tracer for biomass burning. Surprisingly, phosphorus is also showing up as a strong elements in our data. So if you're comparing the levels that we collected during phase 1, again, there's 3 phases, 3 sets of color bars, the phase 1 versus phase 2, phase 3. Potassium is also showing up very strong in phase 1. This is during active fire. We think this is really coming from the fire retardants and suppressants, and also biomass burning also directly produce some of those potassiums. So this contrast between phase 1 and phase 2 and 3 become a little bit less in the indoor measurements. The outdoor measurements clearly shows this much higher levels of those elements during the active fire. This is a log scale, so we are looking at orders magnitudes differences for those fire-related elements. So just moving on to some ongoing work, those are the work we have done so far. Currently, we're helping the Palisade area to set up a CAP air monitoring network. This is really trying to inspired by the Phoenix network that Caltech colleagues set up for the Eaton area. So we're about to develop 20 sensors in the Pali area to track real-time air quality, and we'll share those data in real time. At CAP LA's website. CAP LA is a community action project. LA is real, again, a community-driven initiative in response to this LA fire disaster, trying to provide information and data to inform community better decisions. Along the way, we're also expanding our indoor-outdoor measurements that I just described to you to both the Palisade area and the Eaton area. We also have more than 300 homes signed up to continue to do those indoor sampling and outdoor sampling that I just showed you what we did during and after the fires. We'll continue that efforts for the next few months. Similarly, we're also testing those soft goods like stuffed animals, clothing, clothes, carpets, and towels, and stuff that people have concerns about could potentially absorb those VOCs and contaminants during the fire and off-gassing in people's home. So far we have tested one example, a children's costume that is impacted by the fire. And we're seeing the total VOC emissions are really high once we put those stuff into our chamber in our lab. Their orders of magnitude higher than the background level, which is the blue line here, over 8 hours of testing. The good news is after one wash, this VOC levels dropped almost by 50%. And I don't have data here, but we're actually in the process of washing the materials multiple times. So washing those materials do help to reduce the VOC emissions from those. Again, I know there's some questions related to whether the clothes can be wear, should be washed. So we're trying to generate more data to help community members to make those decisions. So with that, I really just want to acknowledge the LA Fires field study team that we worked closely in the field. This is a group picture we took, including some of the colleagues that will present today. And there's so many UCLA students and colleagues also contributed to this work, including Dr. Jarrett today with us. And many funding sources, the LA Fire Health Studies funded by Speaker Family, the CAP LA Community Action Project LA is funded by Kane Foundation, The Cap Air project is co-funded by Don Hart Family Foundation, Moore Foundation, California Air Resource. There's so many people helped to make these studies become successful and available so that we can generate those data to share with community members. Thank you so much. I'll just pause here and then maybe pass the floor to my colleague, Leah, Dr. Hilderbrand, if she's available to continue to share some data from her mobile measurements. And I will hold on till the end to answer questions in the Q&A sessions.
Sounds great. Thank you. Let me just go ahead and share my slides. All right. Can you all see my slides? Yeah, hi. Thank you, Yifeng. So yes, my team is also part of the LA Fire Health Study. And I just want to say we're not located in the LA area. Just letting you know, though, I did do my undergraduate degree at Caltech, so I'm quite familiar with the area and also, know many of the community members who were impacted by the fires. So this Fire Health Study was funded primarily by the Spiegel Family Fund. And this is the UT Austin study team. I just wanted to thank everyone who participated in this work. I have the same photograph there of our team together with Yifeng's team taking mobile measurements, and want to thank all of my colleagues and students and other professors at UT Austin that have made this possible to collect these data as quickly as we could. And so I should start by saying that we were not there during the fires. We came out sort of as quickly as we could, which was just exactly the beginning of February. I think we decided we arrived in Los Angeles on February 1st. So we were not there during the fires or during the smoldering, but more in the immediate period after that. And there's two things we are doing at UT Austin, broadly, two things. One is that we are actually working on developing a better emissions inventory for wildfires at the wildland-urban interface. So basically, we have all of these air quality models that try to predict air quality and that include emissions from wildfires. But right now, the wildfire emissions in those models just mostly assume that vegetation is burning, not homes and other structures, etc. And so we are working on developing inventories for wildfires at the wildland-urban interface, and specifically for the LA area, so that future fires can be predicted. And then we are also taking measurements with our mobile laboratory, and we did that through most of February of 2025. And we are actually in Los Angeles right now. The team is in LA right now until Tuesday of next week, taking measurements again. So I just want to briefly introduce this emissions inventory work and just show why it's important. And so this is kind of a summary figure of calculating fuel loadings. So what is the kilograms per area, kilograms per meter squared of fuel that can burn in a fire, right? And you can see here when you're in the mountains that fuel loading is much lower. Those are the blue colors versus when you are in the neighborhoods. And then if you focus in on this yellow square here, you can see that also within the neighborhoods, the kind of structure you have will matter. So again, here within this neighborhood in Altadena, you see here that this is the golf course. So this is blue. Again, it's just grass. The fuel loading is relatively low. And then you see here the homes, higher fuel loadings. And then this is Lake Avenue. Yeah, this is Lake Avenue. And so there you have more commercial structures to the left and right of Lake Avenue, which have higher fuel loading, right? There's more stuff in a commercial building in general than in a residential home in terms of what can burn. And so again, that's important to be able to predict emissions from these fires and the exposures the community members will be exposed to. So that's one of the things we're doing. The other things we're working on, again, are the measurements. And what we did during those measurements is so we have this mobile laboratory, a van that's instrumented with different instrumentation, so we can drive it around and take measurements while we're driving. We take a data point every second, and so we can actually take measurements live while we're driving and sort of get in a sense for the spatial variability of pollutant levels. And then we also did some indoor-outdoor measurements at about 10 different houses. to measure indoor and outdoor pollutant levels, again, in the aftermath of the fires. And so this is just a schematic. We have a Ford E-Transit. So the most important part of that vehicle to us is that it has no internal combustion engine. So when we are driving around, we are not accidentally measuring our own exhaust. And we can also temporarily be stationary without having to worry about our own exhaust. And then we have two large instruments on that vehicle and a couple of small ones. But the two big ones is a mass spectrometer that looks at aerosol, so particle mass and composition, and then another mass spectrometer that looks at gas phase species, so VOCs. And so again, just some pictures of our team sampling in these neighborhoods, and then again, sometimes being co-located next to a house and taking indoor-outdoor measurements. All right, so just to show you a snapshot of data, and this is from the Altadena area, measurements taken February 14th of this year. So in these measurements, we try to go through the same route twice per day to get a sense of the diurnal variability, so how pollutant concentrations change by time of day. And I show this graph here to show you they change quite a bit. So on the left, you see a map of Altadena. So we took this drive between 1 and 4 p.m. on February 14th. So again, these dots here are measurements, and then the color denotes the concentration, in this case of total PM1, because that's what our mass spectrometer measures. And then taking sort of the same measurements a couple hours later in the evening, we see much higher concentrations of PM1. And again, we don't just measure total mass, we also measure composition. And the quick takeaway here is that most of that PM that we're measuring is organic. And then just taking similar measurements in the Palisades. This is from a day when we were, taking continuous measurements for about 8 days, so we don't have the sort of earlier in the day and later in the day figure for in this case. But generally, I wanted to point out that we did see, in general, lower concentrations in the Palisades than in the Altadena area. That's not too surprising. That's generally the case, with wildfires. The sea breeze in the Palisades really helps with air pollutant concentrations, but it's important to consider that Altadena in general has higher PM levels than the Palisades. And then just looking at some of the house sampling. So we were only at these houses for 3 hours at each home, right? And so we're just measuring with inlet lines wherever we could get into the house. Usually a window that's close to a driveway, taking those indoor-outdoor measurements. And here I'm just kind of showing you a little bit more of a complex figure, and then I'll summarize this in a little bit, but just to show you what some of the almost raw data looks like. And so at the beginning of this period, let me see if I can get a pointer. So this is, we're driving around, then we are next to the house taking outdoor measurements, right? Then we switch to indoor, outdoor, indoor. We go out for lunch. We go to the next house, take indoor, outdoor, indoor measurements, and then drive to the third house, and then again switch between taking indoor, outdoor, and indoor measurements. And so what we can do is I can average over these areas to just have like one outdoor measurements and then one indoor, one outdoor, one indoor at these 3 different homes. And these 3 different homes were all in the Eaton fire area, but there was one house that was in the burn zone and undamaged, one house that was in the burn zone and damaged, and another house that was not in the burn zone. So this one was in Pasadena, the third house. And so what we see here, again, these are PM concentrations. The open circles are outdoor concentrations, and the filled circles are indoor concentrations. And we see at this first house, higher outdoor PM concentrations than indoor PM concentrations. That's actually very common in general, what we observe in terms of particulate matter concentrations. So particles don't penetrate perfectly from outdoors in general. So in general, PM levels are lower indoors if there's no sources indoors, right? Very different story if you're in the process of cooking or something like that, or vacuuming. But if there are no sources indoors, generally you would expect lower PM indoors than outdoors. Interestingly, in the second house, which was damaged, this is a house that that had a detached garage that had burned down. And you can also see on the outside of the house some charring. This indoor house had higher concentrations, higher PM concentration indoors than outdoors. And then while we were there, somebody came by to test the HVAC system and turned that on for the first time since the fires, and we saw this huge peak, this huge spike in PM concentrations due to the HVAC system being turned on and presumably like resuspension of particles and dust in the house. And then the third house, again, not in the burn zone. In this case, outdoor levels are still pretty much the same, and indoor levels are quite low. And then this third house also had an air filtration device, and when they turned that on, PM concentrations dropped even lower. And so the story here is comparing these three homes is yes, the first home, undamaged home, we're not seeing anything that's unexpected. The second home, we do see higher concentration indoors. And this story here with turning on the HVAC system is a bit of a cautionary tale in that even after the fires, right, when you're doing something in the home that might resuspend some of the dirt on the smoke or the pollutants that might have deposited, it's important to keep wearing a personal protective equipment. And then again, no matter how sort of low your particle levels, if you have a particle filtration device, you can further reduce them. This is actually the same data. I'll go over this just quickly now, taking ratios of indoor and outdoor. So this tells the same story. Ratio less than 1, meaning concentrations are lower inside than outside. Here they are higher inside than outside. And you have the impact of the HVAC system and the impact of the air filter getting turned on, reducing the concentrations. I just have one figure of VOC measurements today. We have a lot more data that we hope to present soon at a later point. But this is a VOC. This is some of the same data, an indoor to outdoor ratio of furfural, which is a VOC that is not particularly toxic. That's not what I chose it for, but it's a fire marker. Furfural is a fire marker. And so these are your three houses, the same three houses. House 1 in the burn zone undamaged, house 2 in the burn zone damaged, and then house 3 that was not in the burn zone. And so you can see here elevated higher concentrations indoor and outdoor than outdoors of this fire marker for the houses inside of the burn zone. You see a little bit of the impact of the HVAC system getting turned on here too, and then much lower concentrations in a house that's not in the burn zone. And again, so this was about 2 weeks after the fires. The big question is for how long are VOCs elevated? And we don't have that question quite yet. Again, there's still many people continuously taking measurements like the EFRU's group, but also we are going back to those three houses actually today and tomorrow. So we'll soon have data to say, well, how does it look like a couple of months later? And so in summary, what we found is that the fires continue to impact air quality weeks after the fire. We generally saw higher particulate matter concentrations in Altadena than the Palisades, and we are taking new measurements right now and also continuing more detailed analysis of the data that we already collected. With that, I would just like to thank all of my colleagues again, as well as the LA Fire Health Study and the Spiegel Family Fund for funding the study, and I'd be happy to answer questions later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. I think I'm next on the list, so I'll take over now, if that's okay. And I'll just share my screen really quickly and put it in presentation mode and take away. All right. Thanks, everyone, for the opportunity to meet with you tonight. My name is Mike Kleeman at UC Davis, and I'm another part of the LA Health Consortium that was monitoring the wildfire during the active fire and in the aftermath of the fire. I was involved because we are working on a project for the California Air Resources Board looking at wildfires in California, and we're doing measurements and modeling for those wildfires. And so this was a major event, and we were sort of poised and ready to get involved basically. So during the active fire, we were able to get into the field and to make measurements in and around the Eaton fire area. And we were able to, take what we had at our fingertips out into the field with an electric vehicle and try to make some measurements. And I won't go into all the details of the measurements. I think we've already had great introductions about the flavor of the data that you can get. But maybe just saying one thing about measurements during the active fire period. These are measurements on January 11th of volatile organic compounds, VOCs. And these are basically fingerprints of the VOCs. There's hundreds of them on these plots. Measurements were taken at 3 different locations moving downwind from the Eaton fire area. And essentially what you can see is that there's very strong differences. You go from a very fire impacted area into an area that's more typical Los Angeles sort of urban air pollution. And we'll be analyzing that data and looking at it in greater detail, trying to understand what the health effects possibly are of those different VOC compounds. And this is all building not only into just a measurement database, but also a modeling database that Leah introduced. We're going to take that emissions inventory that UT Austin is producing, and we're going to put it into a chemical transport model to say not only what was your exposure at the points where we have measurements, but can we estimate those exposures everywhere across the entire air basin? And we hope that will give a better idea of what everybody was exposed to during the active event. Now, I wanted to shift gears, though, and talk about the current monitoring, the ongoing monitoring, and just a quick slide about the motivation for that. Some of you asked questions in the lead up to the meeting tonight about the particles sizes that we're measuring. And the PM10 and the PM2.5 are standard sizes. Leah just mentioned PM1. Those are particles smaller than 1 micron in diameter. But there's really a range of particle sizes all the way from 1 nanometer up to 10 microns in size. And that size of the particle has a big impact on how far the dust and the debris that's resuspended during the cleanup operations will travel. How far away is the potential impact of the health effects for anything contained in that dust and the debris that may be re-aerosolized during the cleanup operations. And so what we're trying to do is to make measurements during the cleanup operations to try to look at the size distribution of the lead in the particles, the size distribution of the arsenic, the cadmium, the other heavy metals that are potentially in the debris cleanup, and trying to get an idea of that size distribution so that we can understand how far downwind it might travel and where the impact zone might be. And so we also are taking mobile measurements in the impacted zones. We've been to the fire zones now 5 times since the wildfires happened, making measurements for several days at a time, using a range of instrumentation. And really, again, what we're adding is that size resolved collection of the particles and being able to analyze what is the size distribution of the lead, what is the size distribution of the arsenic. And not only to understand immediately what's in your air in your neighborhoods, but then also to understand from a modeling perspective, when we put it into those calculations and being able to predict accurately, what's the exposure sort of field look like. That's really what we're trying to add to the other, world quality, measurements that are being made already, trying to add value with that. So we did sampling all through the different neighborhoods. This is just a drive trace again during one of our visits during March. During the cleanup phase. And this is just a quick slide. You've all seen the neighborhoods. I won't sort of belabor that, but try to go to the next slide if possible and show the, just again, a distribution of the measured concentrations that were detected during the drive throughout Altadena. You can see those hot spots, and those hot spots move around. It's really dependent on where that cleanup activity is happening on that day. And so if I did it again a week or a month later, I would see different hotspots, again, reflecting what's going on. This was all before the golf course was being used as that transfer station. And so we don't have a lot of activity going on there. But we're trying to measure the particle size distribution, and that's shown in the lower part of the plot here, the particle diameter on the lower axis going from 10 nanometers at the low end to 10 microns on the high end, and then the amount of mass that we're finding there. What we want to fill in is that chemical composition to know the lead, the arsenic, and all those other components of those particles. And I wish I had all that detail to share with you tonight, but we're still waiting on the ICP-MS lab to give us those numbers back. We expect them any day now. And so we're definitely going to share all that information with the community as we get it. This is another shot, again, a day later. The hot spots move around again according to the activity. Here we did sample around the golf course on this day. And again, it was very quiet there because the transfer station was not active. We have since been back in April and May and done continued monitoring in those areas. And so we have a really good set of samples collected also around the golf course while it's being used for that. And we are trying very hard to get the chemical analysis done, and we're very eager to share all that information with you. We also are sampling in the Palisades, and so we're looking at concentrations there, and we're trying to understand the health impacts in both areas by being able to estimate exposure fields later on. And again, as we get this information, just as soon as we get it, we're going to share it with all the community members. So my presentation is brief tonight. I have more methods than answers right now, but just with the pledge to you all that we're very, very aware of the concerns of the community and the questions that you're asking, and we're trying very hard to integrate our studies with your community concerns, talking to people while we're there collecting data, and we're definitely going to share as soon as possible the results of all of our studies. And make all of you aware of what we find. So with that, again, I think we're going to have time for questions afterwards, but I think I'm going to pass things over to Chris so that he can talk a little bit about the water quality sampling that's going on as well.
Thank you so much, Michael, and hello, everyone. I see some of the participants in the water quality study, so thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. I want to talk some overview of the study that we did on drinking water quality following the Eaton Palisades fires. So we were looking primarily, we know that in drinking water, it has been reported before. I think the first time was in the tops and the campfire in Northern California, that when you have fires that impact homes, particularly drinking water distribution systems, there is some release again of volatile organic compounds, which seems to be a very repeating term coming up tonight. In this case is into the drinking water. And there's two main thoughts. One of them is that during the combustion process, or even just thermal damage of the plastic pipe, plastic infrastructure, you might release some of these volatile compounds into the drinking water. Another idea is that it's possible that through breakages in the plastic pipes or decreased water pressure, that can siphon some of the smoke and introduce these chemicals into the drinking water. So to address this potential concern in drinking water, we sampled 53 homes as part of, again, of the LA Fire Health Study Consortium between February 1st and April 14th. So this spans some areas that had the do not drink advisories active, and also after the do not drink advisories were lifted. I believe for the Eaton fire, that ranged anywhere from January 24th all the way to I think middle of March of this year. We used a commercial lab to test water for this set of, I think, about 40 volatile organic compounds, using a direct-to-consumer kit to be able to get a quick turnaround that we needed with these chemicals. They are volatile, so they can be lost into the air quite easily. So again, thank you to all of those of you that participated in the study, and thank again for your time. This shows, let me go back to the slides. There we go. So to put in context, one of the main VOCs that there is concern is benzene, and benzene is regulated in drinking water based on what is called the maximum contaminant level. This is a level at which, if it's a concentration of a pollutant above this MCL, or the maximum contaminant level, it is an enforceable level by the California water boards. Benzene in California has a stricter maximum contaminant level compared to the federal level. And in California, we have a limit of 1 microgram per liter, which is the same as ppb, or parts per billion. So it's really the VOC with one of the strictest levels for drinking water that we would see coming from combustion of plastic pipes. Benzene, of course, is not the only VOC that we were looking at. We know that in general, we saw also naphthalene, toluene, and styrene. They all are related to each other. They all look like rings. So the chemical structure, we tried it. They are six-member rings, and are known products of combustion. And so these are they're different levels. So naphthalene, for example, doesn't have maximum contaminant level. There is a drinking water equivalent guideline that is not enforceable, but it's much higher. You see there that is a level at 700 times the level of benzene. Toluene, which is very closely related to benzene itself, is also higher, about 150 times that of benzene. And there's another one, styrene, also related to benzene, about 100 parts per billion. So now on to our results. So we sampled 53 homes, split between the Altadena area and in the Palisades area, and they were tested with this EPA method 524 that is specific to volatile organic compounds in water. And the figure to your right, you see the concentrations of benzene in ppb. The blue dotted line is the maximum contaminant level in California. So you see that for the most part, most of the homes were below that level if it was detected, except for a single sample that was above the maximum contaminant level. In many of the homes, the water access was shut off, and so when we were to sample, some of you allowed us to like open the water and then be able to sample. During this time, the water agencies have been testing on their end and doing flushing, which is the state of practice to clear these VOCs from the drinking water system and then retest before lifting the do not drink advisory. Here the QR code, there's a data brief that again is published under the LA Fire Health Consortium as a resource for you. And again, it was not just benzene that we detected. Benzene was the only one from these volatile organic compounds related to combustion or wild and urban interface fires that had a single detection above the maximum contaminant level. We also saw the detects of, again, naphthalene, toluene, styrene in some of the drinking water samples, but all below the maximum contaminant level, fortunately. Now, in terms of actions, like I mentioned, the water agencies on their end actually were proactive in testing and then flushing and then retesting before lifting the do not drink advisories. And this is also something that is recommended by the California water boards, also for homeowners and renters, that as you go or you have been going back home or plan to go back home, it's very important to flushing the water that is already in your at your home. So there is a guideline here. This QR code again has a synthesis of recommendations that we have for you in the data brief, that is based on the document to your right, directly from the California water boards, and it consists on 3 specific actions. 1, flushing pipes at home, essentially running cold water tap at every single tap on your home, starting ideally from the outside tap, so maybe the garden hoses and bibs outside, and making your way indoors, including flushing if you have water heaters, like just flushing the whole tank away. For at least 5 minutes. A little bit longer, it doesn't hurt. This is a one time that I think it's beneficial to flush and not be too strict with water conservation, to make sure that those VOCs get flushed away, especially if you have the water line closed. Second, changing filters. So if you have a fridge filter or any other kind of maybe a whole home drinking water, if you have a filter that is just for the drinking part, just change it. I would recommend to change it because any disturbances to the water during the fires until now might have accumulated some of these chemicals impacting the efficiency of the performance of these filters. So my recommendation again, and it's part of the document as well from the California Water Boards to replace these filters. And then the next recommendation is to the extent of possible, continue testing your water. So you can ask and reach out to the water agencies for the testing that they're doing, but also there are some resources of testing available, maybe consulting with industrial hygienists or other resources as well. So some key takeaways that optimistic in general for the drinking water. Overall, we saw low levels of VOC following the Eaton fire and also the Palisades fire. And I think this is part of lessons learned, thankfully, from the fires from almost 10 years ago in Northern California, of the importance of testing and flushing from water agencies. So in that same way, I want to highlight, again, emphasize the point of making sure to flush all the water lines when you go back home, and if possible, to retest. Here's my contact information. If it's helpful, you're welcome to reach out, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions in the Q&A session. So thank you for your time again, and thank you to those of you that participated in this study.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you all for that very in-depth analysis. That was absolutely fascinating, and I'm very grateful I'm recording this because I'm going to rewatch this many times. Okay, first question. What are safety parameters for returning to standing houses? So I think this person's trying to say, what are the safety parameters for returning to standing houses? Who would like to answer that?
I just answered one in the chat, and I guess it depends on, is the standing house in the burn zone or is it sort of around the burn zone? Uh, Personally, I think that I would not move back into a standing home inside the burn zone where there's still cleanup activity all around it at this time. It's a major construction site, and there's the possibility of material being stirred up that might contain some toxic material in it. But then there's also just the dust and the sort of emissions from all the construction equipment itself that is a health concern in and of itself. And so I think personally, if you have options and you can, be somewhere else until the cleanup is complete, I would prefer that for me and my family to not move back into the active burn zone until we're further into the cleanup. We're into maybe the reconstruction phase, not the actual hauling stuff away phase still. That's a personal opinion, but that's where I would come down on it.
Yeah, and I guess I would add that it's really important to have the indoor and the outdoor environments tested by a registered industrial hygienist or equivalently certified exposure scientist to ensure that the levels that are in the home are lower than health-based standards from the Office of Environmental Health Hazards Assessment or from the Cal EPA or federal EPA. So many of the substances that could be in the home still due to off-gassing are a major concern for respiratory, neurological health, and some are known carcinogens such as benzene. So it's very important if you are considering going back that you have your home tested, get the advice from a registered industrial hygienist or equivalent, and if that passes all of the standard tests, you may consider going back if you're willing to live with all the dust and noise. But I think Dr. Kleeman's making a very good point that there is going to be a lot of additional emissions coming off the removal of all the soil and the dust and then the heavy machinery. So that's something, and You also have to consider noise impacts as well. You're going to be in a very active, heavy construction area when they're removing the soil. So that's another, if somebody's working at home, that's going to be a real annoyance to them as well.
Thank you for that.
I would just like to add one more aspect. I think many of the questions still concerns with family with young children. That's just another layer of susceptibility that we have to be really careful about, especially for, I think I would agree with Mike and Mike's assessment personally, especially if you have young in your family with young children or elderly people or people with asthma or COPD preconditions. I'll be really careful, more on the cautious side at this point in time. But this is only related to the standing homes inside the burn zones. And I also think there's people worry about, like, if they're miles away, should they worry about what's going on in the burn zone? I think for those folks, I think it's less of concern. It's more about just general air pollution, Los Angeles smog type of air issues, and your nearby freeways and other industrial sources near your home, but not so much related to the burn zone if you're miles away. But inside the burn zone, you really have to take more precautions at this point.
I agree with that completely, Yifeng. I think that there were several questions about this as well. How far is far enough? And I think that that is measured in miles. It's not across the entire air basin. So you don't have to, I think, be immediately concerned about this 20 miles away. But somewhere between 20 and 0 miles, there is going to be a zone right next to that sort of impact area where I think there is still cause for concern. And that's what we're desperately trying to figure out on your behalf is how many miles, what is the sort of rate of sort of decay around the impact zone. And we're trying really, really hard to figure that out. I wish I had answers for you tonight, but soon.
Can you address those folks who live burn zone adjacent, meaning within a fourth of a mile or less of the burn zone?
And again, I don't want to put a number on where that sort of how quickly it drops off. This is what we're trying to really figure out as quickly as possible. How much dust is being stirred up? What's in that dust? And what's the size? How far will it travel? And we're trying really hard to address that. But I just don't think I can put a number on it. Is a quarter mile versus a half mile versus a mile? I just don't think I can say that tonight. I wish I could, but as soon as we can, we will.
Well, as we all know, there was the advisory given by Public Health of 250 yards, and many of us are wondering if that is an adequate distance. But it sounds like you all are still unsure and hope to come back to us with further reports.
Well, I would say within a quarter mile, it's the same advice for in the burn zone. If you're going to re-inhabit your house, you should have it tested, both for indoor air contaminants, for residual dust. So there are dust swipe sampling protocols, and for metals in the soil outdoors. So, that immediate zone is likely to have had substantial smoke impacts and potentially some other impacts from removal of debris from the construction sites. Dr. Kleeman's right. Beyond that immediate zone, we don't have a great understanding about how far those impacts would go.
Is there a concern about trucks carrying debris in the areas just outside the burn zone?
So I think there's a concern anytime you have a lot of truck traffic because the trucks emit something. They have exhaust that's emitting oxides of nitrogen, which is, a known pollutant that has a range of health effects associated with it. They have brake and tire wear. There's all the dust that is being ground up on the roadways and resuspended. And I think everybody is trying to mitigate those effects. I think that there's a lot of street sweeping going on. There's a lot of road washing going on. So everyone's aware of what's happening. But the scale of this construction zone is massive. And so despite the best efforts, you're still getting resuspended dust. And I think it's just a constant battle, essentially. And so I think there is reason to be concerned, but there's no way to clean it up without that truck traffic. And so I don't have an answer for, how to do more than we're already doing. They're already covering every load is being covered. The trucks are all clean California trucks, so you don't ever see a smoking diesel engine anywhere in the construction site, which is great. But it's just still a lot of activity with heavy machinery. And even if they're doing the best, there's going to be an impact there, which is again why I personally would advise to not be in the burn zone, even in a standing home. There's just too much going on there right now.
And if you have a home that's on the track or a school that's on the pathway where these trucks move every day, that would be a concern as well, is what I'm hearing.
It would be a
It
concern.
is a concern. It is a concern.
You definitely
Okay.
want to ensure that you have indoor air filters running and that they're sufficient for the size of the house or the rooms. Many people probably have filters installed on their air conditioners. They could run those without running the air conditioning to ensure they're getting continuous HEPA filtering. There is a concern in some of those homes that are in the burn zone about the VOCs and the off-gassing. You can buy charcoal-based air filters, but they are expensive. You're going to be looking at probably $600 to $800 for a good unit. But having HEPA filters running indoors, if you are on one of these truck routes, is highly advisable.
All right. Thank you
I
so
agree.
much.
Just one final thing, a lot of people enjoy spending time in their yards and outdoors. For the next 6 months, it might be a good time to go find a park that's a mile away or 2 miles away and spend time outdoors there. I think we all value our time outdoors, but maybe we could try to find something a little further away from the construction zone or the truck travel zone. That would be a better place to spend time outdoors, in addition to everything that Dr. Jarrett just advised.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the next question. Let's see. I'm trying to find one that you didn't already answer. Okay. Okay. Oh, and lead, cadmium, and arsenic were found in samples on my home. I'm a half a mile south of the burn area. When can I get clear guidelines on what can be safely cleaned and what should be thrown out? So I think this person is trying to figure out how to sort through the items in their home that's been impacted, and they have high lead levels. They're concerned about whether or not they are making good choices or how to make good choices about those items in their home. If they should be cleaning them, should they be letting them go? Any thoughts?
I'll ask a question to one of my fellow panelists. Yifeng, you were doing studies on the washing of items and how things are sort of being cleaned up over time. Does any of that include the metals as well as the VOCs?
Yeah, we are planning to including metals. So far we only tested for VOCs, but we can certainly include metals moving forward. But so this is again my personal thoughts. I think the metals that come with the dust, if you wash the clothes, if VOC get remediated, I would think the particles can also get remediated along the way. So I think there is potential to just clean the stuff, clean your clothes, clean those soft goods as if you can. That's definitely gonna help. I don't think that's gonna hurt you. I think that's gonna only help you. If there are certain things that you can throw away, but we also understand there are things just so valuable for many other reasons that you don't really cannot throw away. I would say try some other mitigation measures. But I think the home that are tested positive or impacted by those metals, which is not surprising because those are really come from burning batteries, burning plastics, and especially this is an urban wildfire, to show high levels and that's also show up in our data. To do a full scale remediation if the insurance can cover it or if there's resources to pay for it. I think that could be useful, helpful.
Yeah, and I guess I would maybe ask the resident, how high were those levels? Because it's not uncommon in the LA urban environment to find lead. Were they above health protected standards? Certainly it's a concern. Lead is a powerful neurotoxin. It can affect almost every organ in the body, and it is a suspected carcinogen. So you want to minimize your exposure. And, I would say again, having a registered industrial hygienist come and test and give you advice on how to clean, because there are well-known methods for remediating after smoke intrusion from a fire. And this happens in regular fires, urban fires, wildfires. So there are many industrial hygienists that are very skilled at giving that kind of advice. And several of them will give you advice where you could do a lot of the remediation yourself if you're wearing proper personal protective equipment. And what we're recommending is for people going to do that kind of work, they should be using a P100 mask, not just an N95 respirator, and that should be equipped with vapor cartridges as well as particle cartridges, so they can protect themselves against VOCs and against particles. But the industrial hygienists can give you that kind of advice, and it's hard. If they are above health protective standards, you definitely are going to need to remediate it. And you may have grounds to make claims through your insurance company.
Okay, thank you so much. And if someone's putting these items in their laundry in their machine, does that contaminate their laundry machine?
It could be, but you just do multiple cycles. You clean up your laundry machine after you wash your soft goods. I think that could just also be very helpful.
So
Essentially,
do a load maybe with or do a run without a load in it.
right. So if your next load is a clean, clothes that you worry about what is the residue left in the machine, I would recommend doing like just empty cycle, like just cleaning cycle without anything in it would be helpful. And so far, and also just our data are so preliminary, we just started to test those. We were hoping to get more data available and share back to the community once we have more samples tested.
And I have someone asking here, as far as soft goods go, they're worried, should they take extra precautions with saving items if they have children? Or is there a different consideration level that they should be, keeping in mind with retaining items or cleaning items?
As I mentioned, that children are really sensitive. They breathe in a lot more air per their body mass just because their lungs still developing, and they're just overall should be more on the precautious side, I would say. So I think if it's related to the toys, especially if the material they're like spending lots of time with it, right? If this is their toys or their clothes or their beddings, I think those, if they can afford, maybe just try to replace those. If there's things that they only wear like once a while, then maybe washing them and reuse them is okay. So exposure also has these components about exposure duration, like how long you will be using these atoms, right? How much time that you're spending near the source, that all adds up to your overall total exposure levels. So the time component is also important to keep in mind when it comes to make those decisions.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next question then. We're going to move into structural off-gassing concerns. Smoke damaged homes. Hygienists say different things. How do I know if a house is safe inside? Drywall, insulation, etc.
So the smoke can definitely infiltrate into drywalls and insulations, because there's also porous materials that can basically do the same thing to absorb volatile organic compounds, just like the soft goods. Yeah, so and then so if completely removing drywall could be a very daunting task. One way to do it is just bring a lot more ventilations, let the air to go through those drywalls, go through your indoor spaces. This is assuming that you're not in the burn zone with so much activities and construction still going on. Just assume that you are impacted, but you're right now the outdoor airs are okay. Then bring the outdoor air to flush out the indoor air could be helpful. And also running the air purifiers, I think Mac mentioned, could be also very helpful. Just to make sure dilute whatever comes out from those soaked material could be really useful.
Yeah, we're working with one of our colleagues who's an adjunct professor at UCLA and a very experienced industrial hygienist, Mr. Hamid Rabzadeh. And he's compiled a simplified list of what you need to do to remediate various aspects of contamination in your house. I can see if he's willing to share that with people. And I think it's not a polished document, but it does include several of the standard remediation measures that an industrial hygienist with a lot of experience would recommend.
Yes, we would very much welcome any further information. We absolutely are kind of learning along the way. And I know many of the experts we've spoken to are learning along the way as well, as this is a unusually dense wildfire. I'm sorry, WUI fire. So we welcome any further information that anyone can share with us. Thank you. So we also have some questions about cyanide. I've got two questions here. I'm going to kind of combine them together. Cyanide and dioxins. Do we need to be testing wall cavities? What are the implications of finding cyanide and dioxins in standing structures? Will they off gas? And if I have cyanide in the beams of my house, is it safe to live in? Should I consider my home a total loss?
Has the person actually had testing to show that there's cyanide and dioxins?
I would say that we do, EFRU does receive the community's pre-remediation tests, and we have received a handful showing cyanide was positive in standing structures.
I mean, certainly those are highly toxic substances. We'd have to know about the levels that were found. So if that person is willing to share their test results, we can take a closer look.
Well, if that person is here today, please feel free to reach out to me at janelawtonmoore@gmail.com. And I can try to put you in touch with folks. Of course, EFRU would always welcome your tests to map on our website. And we only map to the closest cross street, so we don't divulge anyone's personal information. But if you want to reach out to me specifically to pass on your test to the panel here, I'm more than willing to do that for you. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, we're going to move on to VOC related health concerns and remediation. Do VOC, VOC levels, particularly benzene, naphthalene, and oh boy, it's going to challenge me, perchloroethylene, represent unsafe conditions to return to the home. These appear to be above EPA level and or DTSC level.
So benzene is a group 1 carcinogen. So there are various schools of thought on, the levels. I think that the California Office of Environmental Health Hazards Assessment has quite strict levels. If you're going to be returning to the home and living there for an ongoing period, it would fall into either the occupational type exposure or chronic exposure. So the level is 1 part per billion. If it's sort of an instantaneous exposure that somebody might experience if they're going back to their home to get belongings out of that dwelling and they're not living there, 8 ppb for benzene is the standard. If you're above those standards, definitely it's a concern, and you should not reoccupy the house until you get benzene levels well below standards. The World Health Organization basically says there is no safe level of benzene. Now, having said that, we see benzene is emitted all over Los Angeles. It is a component of many of the air pollutants that we encounter all the time. However, if you're above standards, you'll have to take remediation measures, really. And what were the other contaminants?
Yes, they were naphthalene.
Naphthalene.
Yeah.
So
And the other one was perchloroethylene.
uh,
Chloroethylene.
Thank you.
Chlorinated.
That sounds right.
so naphthalene it's a very abundant PAH, polycyclic hydrocarbon. It is associated with oxidative stress in the lungs. So that too, if you're above standard, would be a concern. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe Dr. Kleeman knows more about perchloroethylene, but that's what's typically used in dry cleaning. So it's not uncommon to see that inside of homes, and actually getting a burst of that when you open up your dry cleaning bags has been documented. So it's possible there are other sources that are coming into the house that are contributing to that beyond any fire impacts.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to build for a second on what Dr. Jarrett said. You live in Los Angeles, we all live in California, where we're exposed to things all the time. And so there is benzene in the atmosphere around us. There is naphthalene. You're going to have some PCE from various sources as well. The question is whether or not it's unusually high in your home compared to the outdoor environment, and is it above the health-based standards? I think that we have to accept that we're unlikely to get to zero in California. We're always going to be exposed to some level of this stuff. The question is whether your home is unusual and is higher than what would be expected. And that's where you really have to compare against health-based standards and or the outdoor environment that's surrounding your home.
Yeah. I just want to add one more point. If your level is above the house standards, you definitely should not reoccupy your home. And then run the remediation, like many of us already mentioned. And then after remediation, make sure you retest it to make sure the remediation actually brings the levels back below the house concern level. So I think it's also important, maybe just, people assume after remediation things will just be fine, but I think the post-remediation testing is also important.
So I hear you may be recommending to have a VOC test in a post-remediation situation as well.
Yeah, especially if there's a concern of benzene above on the house standards to start with as a starting point. Then after remediation, get it retested.
Thank you for that, because I have heard some IHs and CIHs say that at this point in month 5, it's not likely that there are still VOCs in a home, even if it hasn't been remediated yet. But what I'm hearing right now is that it's a good idea in a post-remediation scenario to still check for VOCs.
So I think we kind of like use the term VOC loosely in today's talk. The VOCs usually goes on days and months. It could go down like pretty quickly. What is really of concern is those semi-volatile organics, because they can be in both the particle and gas phase. Some of those can degassing over a longer period of time. So there's many different compounds that were this fire brings and emit into the air and get into people's home. So I think, as Mike mentioned, and also with all those other activities going on right now in the burn area, in the burn zone, with the construction also generate lots of VOCs. Just think about all those diesel engines and that is there and working on all those different tasks. So it's not just the fire VOC that is done, but there's many other sources I could imagine going on. So the ES team is bringing the mobile van right now, actually just going around in the burn zone as we're speaking. So my lab went out. We also see very high levels of dust, very high levels of submicron particles, and there's certain conditions in the burn area. So I think it's just like Mike mentioned, there's so much activity, such a massive construction zone right now in the burn area. So that just by itself needs to be put people on the more cautious side.
Thank you for that. We have a couple questions here about one person is asking if porous materials have been removed and they still have VOCs emitting, could that possibly be from drywall, wall insulation, flooring, studs, or other items?
I would say it could be because the VOC does gas into drywalls as well as other soft goods. Again, it's really just a matter about like how well the home can ventilate it, what are the level to start with, how long it has been, what type of VOCs. That is a concern. I think I also see the people asking about the VOC testing. There are standard tests those commercial labs offer. They're usually using standard EPA method to test the top 15 or 17 characteristics of VOCs. This could be a starting point. Chris, you feel free to jump in because you're experts on that, even on the water side.
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, there's a target list of volatile organic compounds. There are also target lists. It just means that the list of what the tests are looking for, and your commercial labs would have to follow one of the EPA typically or ASTM methods. And I think when you contact either an industrial hygienist that connects you to commercial testing or commercial testing, they would list like what methods they use and also if they're certified to what extent to measure these chemicals in the water or also in the air, in dust. So they will have that information available. And that is a set list based on what typically it's fun. It's not necessarily a specific list just for fire impacted areas, but just a set of general compounds that these methods were developed for, and they have been verified, and there's quality assurance and quality checks.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, let me ask this next VOC question. Can VOCs be remediated? And how would they be remediated for?
I'm happy to start then speaking first in the water space and then transfer to air. So one of the, I guess, among all the impacts, I think one reason to have hope is that thankfully VOCs are not new pollutants. We know these pollutants, but this is a new context where we're seeing them, right? The context of fires. These pollutants tend to be, in general, quite hydrophobic, means that they will tend to like to stick to things like activated carbon. So I saw there's a question also in the chat about whether activated carbon filters, like for example, Brita, is it enough? So thankfully it is an efficient way of removing them in water. And then I believe that there might be similar approaches for air, but I'll defer to the air experts on that part of remediating VOCs from air or dust particles.
Thank you. I think Yifeng, you had noted that you'd be able to handle the question, will VOCs resolve themselves, and what is the half-life of these analytes? How long will it take to fix itself? And maybe you might be able to address the idea of remediation as well.
So the half-life of VOCs really just depends on the specific type of VOCs. Some VOCs, like, they can stay indoors for days to weeks. Some as minutes to hours. Very active VOCs, PAHs, those semi-volatiles, they can go from weeks to months. So it really depends on the type. I think those are like overall health concern. For example, benzene, they can stay for days to weeks. They're relatively stable without light. But once they go outside, is with sunlight, they can actually go to like half-life got much shorter because they become more reactive. There's a lots of other compounds they can react with in the outdoor air. So in terms of how to remediate indoor VOCs, again, if the soft goods can be throw away. If they can be washed, wash them. Things that is hard to change, try to increase the ventilation in the indoor space. Using air purifiers, especially those Mike mentioned with active carbon, not just to remove the particles, but also remove all of the volatile organic compounds. Those could also all be very helpful. So like actionable things that community members could consider to implement.
So there's the question of this summer, and it does get quite hot in our area. We have many 90-degree days. Certainly we get up into the hundreds. Sometimes we get as high as 110 or 120 degrees. Considering that there may still be some VOC impact, that there's a lot of debris removal going on, I think we've addressed the idea that if you live within the burn area, it's best to stay out till all construction is completed, and then check your home for impact in an indoor environmental setting. But for those of us who live outside the burn zone and in the adjacent areas, should we be concerned about returning this summer with the high levels of heat?
So first of all, heat can really accelerate VOC off-gassing. So with heat, VOC will come out quickly. Could be if you're not moving back, could be a good thing, because then it just helps to get this VOC out of those dry walls, outside of those insulations that's hard to remove. But it needs to be combined with good ventilation or with, in addition, filtration to help get rid of those VOCs outside, like off-gassing out by the heat from those soft materials. I would think so. And then after that, you make sure you get them away, otherwise it will come back because it's a very temperature dynamic. But I think moving back during the hot seasons with this strong VOC off-gassing, I would not think that's a good idea. I think you want to maybe use this as opportunity to let the VOC off-gassing and then dilute, clean up, and filter it out. That could be an opportunity to use the heat for.
So I hear you saying the heat could be beneficial in accelerating the off-gassing of the VOCs, but you certainly don't want to be there while that's happening.
Exactly. Just like the ventilation, Leah tested, right? Leah tested the ventilation could be helpful, but when it first started, they're gonna just like emit a lot of those particles deposit on it. So you don't want to be there, but you definitely want to run your air ventilation system to make sure it's working.
Right. So keep the air moving in the summertime so that all of that off-gassing has somewhere to go.
Yes.
The other concern is that heat is a multifaceted health risk that affects every major organ system in the body. So if you're experiencing any level of extreme heat, it can make you more susceptible to adverse effects from air pollutants. So it's not definitive evidence, but certainly suggestive evidence that there's an interaction of what we call scientifically, meaning the effects of air pollutants can be made worse on the body in the presence of high heat. So, I mean, in and of itself, it's a good idea to avoid extreme heat, to stay indoors, to use air conditioning on those really hot days. But if you do have to be outside and you're in the burn zone where there could be a lot of off gassing, that's a particularly concerning combination.
Thank you. I do recognize it's 8:30 at this time. If you all are comfortable staying a few minutes longer, we could answer maybe a few more questions. Would that be all right? Maybe 10 minutes more?
Maybe
Okay.
10 minutes more.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your thorough answers. It's wonderful to have you here, all of you. Okay, next question. Can we wear our clothes if there's no smell of smoke? So, in other words, if there's no smell of smoke, does that mean the item is safe? Yifeng, I think you flagged that one for yourself.
So I think no smell of smoke is a good sign for sure. Like it's the sign of a smell of smoke is definitely a red flag, right? Not having the smoke is a good sign, but that's maybe not completely enough because certain volatile like benzene has a very subtle smell, so you don't really, our nose can detect a lot of views. It's very sensitive, so that's really helpful because we can use our sense to detect like unsafe or polluted airs. But our nose doesn't detect everything. That's the flip side. So I would say if you don't smell anything, it's really good sign. But it also depends. This cannot be used just as one single factor to make decisions. It also depends on how close. If you're in the burn zone but you don't smell anything, I would say it's still not just 100% like completely confident on this. I think we still like to see the data get tested. But if you're outside the burn zone and you don't smell anything, I think you should just feel that is okay. You don't have to worry too much. So I think it's really just use it as a way to provide good information, but those information needs to be interpreted in the context of other piece of information. That particular is a case by case situation, I would say.
Thank you for that.
And I see some comments about open windows. My advice would be if there's not a whole lot of a debris removal construction going on in your neighborhood, open your window is always helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And
Jane, there was one question that came up earlier that said, there's really not much known about the health effects of wildfire smoke in general. And the person said, we just feel like guinea pigs. And there is, a reasonably good evidence base on what wildfire smoke does in an acute phase. We know that we'll see more people being admitted to hospital and going to the emergency room for a respiratory illness. There's some evidence that pregnant women that are exposed to wildfire smoke are more likely to have preterm births and low birth weight babies. We also see evidence of elevated mortality in the very acute phase of a fire, meaning in sort of ranges of 1 to 3 days where people are experiencing high smoke. People that are particularly susceptible are more likely to pass on during those periods. And in terms of the long-term effects, we don't have as strong an evidence base there. For cancer risk, however, what we observed from our VOC monitoring, the levels were higher than normal in LA, but they were nowhere near the standards. So typically, you have to have an exposure sustained for a longer period of time to move the needle on your dose of carcinogens to say this is really going to increase your risk. So has it increased your risk of cancer? I wouldn't expect that it would have. However, if you go back into one of these homes and there's benzene and you're exposed to that over the course of months, that would be a concern. In terms of The respiratory effects lingering, there are only a few studies, but they do show that there can be lung function effects that can go out for more than a year after the fire. And that's something that is a concern because people's lungs aren't working well, their hearts are working harder, and they can have higher risk of heart attacks or other respiratory infections, which can also have their own impact. And then when we think about, the long-term facts, what we do know is that, there's a mental health component there that has been better studied. And this follows most disasters, but it has also been documented for wildfire. So people are more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder and lack of sleep. And those are, you really have to monitor yourself if you're going through all of the stressors of perhaps losing your home or having your home standing in the burn zone and not knowing what to do. And you're undergoing a lot of stress and you start to have symptoms where you're not sleeping well, where you're feeling overwhelmed, where you're feeling very sad and you can't seem to make yourself feel better, it's very important to get to a qualified medical health care provider to deal with those mental health issues. Because if we have any evidence about the longer term effects that can linger for more than a year, it's on the mental health side. So that's something that, to make sure that you're contacting your doctor and you're talking to family members if you're not feeling well, in terms of your mood or your sleep patterns.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So I want to flip back for one moment and say that I see Michael Kleeman wrote in the chat, I would personally change air filters monthly until major cleanup and construction is complete. So I just wanted to state that for folks who are watching this recording and can't see that in the chat.
It's hard to have a one size fits all recommendation, but if I had to pick a number, that's the number I would pick.
Thank you. So I want to recognize it is now 8:38 and you all have been incredibly informative and patient and detailed with your answers. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for making the time. I know some of you are on East Coast time, and you're present for our 3 hour difference. So thank you for being here. And we hope that you can come back again. It sounds like there's quite a lot of information that's still being disseminated and kind of processed, and we would very much like to have you come back, maybe when some more data becomes clear. And with that, I'm just going to say thank you for everyone who was able to be here tonight. If you have your homes tested, whether it's pre-remediation or post-remediation, EFRU would very much like to have you send in your test. You can go to our website at efru.la, and we have a submit test at the top tab at the top of our site. And if you can upload your test there, we'll be able to map that. Please know we only map tests to the closest cross street so that everyone can maintain anonymity, but it does provide information not only to your community, but it helps EFRU advocate for safe structures, remediation of our schools and public spaces as well. So with that,
Jane, could I just make one mention that UCLA Health has established a health registry that's open to anybody that might be interested
that's
in
right.
being part of a long-term health study. And unfortunately, the link I was provided seems to be under repair right now. So I'll make sure that we get a link that's working to your group.
That'd be great.
Really like to have people from the Eden Fire area register. You don't have to be a UCLA patient, and there's no obligation to become engaged in a future study, but this just ensures that if you are interested in participating and perhaps having more monitoring done on your health and trying to help us to understand the long-term implications of these fires, you have an opportunity to do so.
And we'll get that information from you, and I'll make sure that that goes out in our newsletters moving forward. And perhaps we'll even find a space for it on our website. So thank you all again, to all of our panelists for all the dedicated work that you are doing right now to inform us and provide us with a sense of a sense of guidance in this time where there's very little for us to go by. We can't tell you how grateful we are. And we look forward to having you again. Thank you to everyone who was able to come tonight. And please, if you want to watch the recording or pass this information on to others, we should have the recording up on our EFRU.LA website. Go to the resources tab at the top of the page, and you can then go to EFRU videos and then click on speakers. We should have this video posted by Saturday evening. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.